سال میں کافی چیزیں چینج ہو گئی ہیں. 6 سال میں کافی چیزیں چینج ہو گئی ہیں اور آج کی دنیا اتنی تیزی سے موو کرتی ہے کہ اگر ہم اس کے ساتھ ساتھ چینج نہیں ہوں گے تو ہم پیچھے رہ جائیں گے. آپ لوگوں نے جتنی باتیں کی سب اس کے اندر بہت وزن ہے, ساری صحیح باتیں ہیں, اور میں کیونکہ آپ میں سے ہی ہوں, میں یہ ساری چیزیں ریئلائز کرتا ہوں, اینڈ اٹس نتھنگ نیو فار می. مجھے پرائم منسٹر شہباز شریف صاحب نے کہا کہ میں اب اپنی لائف کی ایک ایسے سٹیج میں ہوں کہ میں ایک لیگیسی چھوڑنا چاہتا ہوں, اور وہ لیگیسی یہ ہے کہ پاکستان اکنامکلی پراسپرس ہو, پاکستان کی اکانومی ریوائیو ہو. جو 90s میں ایک ڈائریکشن میں ہم نکلے تھے اسی ٹریک پہ چڑھ کے, اور جو ہم نے ایک اس زمانے میں سلوگن کیا تھا ایشین ٹائیگر, اس راستے پہ ہم چلیں. اور فوکس انڈسٹریلائزیشن کے اوپر. آپ سب لوگ ابھی کاروباری لوگ ہیں اور آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ کاروبار چلانا اور پروفیٹیبل کرنا اب کتنا مشکل ہو چکا ہے. وہ سارا کچھ میں چھوڑ کے اپنا کاروبار, میں پرائم منسٹر شہباز شریف صاحب کے اس مشن اور اس ویژن کی وجہ سے انسپائر ہوں کہ میں ادھر آیا ہوں. زبیر موتی والا صاحب نے بہت پبلک سروس کی, کتنے سال ایٹ دس اسٹیج آف ہز لائف انہوں نے اپنے کاروبار کو سیکریفائز کیا ہوگا اور کنٹریبیوٹ کیا. بہت صحیح باتیں. بلوانی صاحب کو میں بڑا پرانا جانتا ہوں, زبیر موتی والا صاحب کو زبیر طفیل صاحب بولے نہیں بٹ پرانے میرے ساتھی ہیں. آپ میں سے اکثر سے میرا انٹریکشن ہوا ہے, کچھ میں نے ینگ فیسز دیکھی ہیں, ویری انسپائرڈ کہ 4th جنریشن بزنس مینیجر بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں. واٹ اے ہسٹری آف دس چیمبر, اینڈ 75 سال سے ان کا خاندان کاروبار میں ہے, اینڈ دے ڈیزرو all their rights, and they deserve to stay in business and prosper in business and more than what they did 75 years ago. So that is where I am coming from. دیکھیں ٹائم تو کم ہے, but I really wanted to hear you out. Remember, Karachi is the epicenter of business, Karachi is the epicenter of GDP growth, and Karachi is the epicenter of revenue collection. And Karachi Chamber is the epicenter of Karachi. So I could not have started my mission, مجھے ابھی 4 ہفتے ہوئے آئے ہوئے, without visiting you. اور میں نے آپ لوگوں کو سیٹرڈے کو تکلیف دی, بٹ انڈر پرائم منسٹر شہباز شریف سیٹرڈے سنڈے ڈونٹ مین اینی تھنگ, دے آر جسٹ لائک اینی ورکنگ ڈیز. میں پرسنلی جب فرائیڈے کی رات کو میں لاہور پہنچتا ہوں اسلام آباد سے, تو سیٹرڈے پورا دن جو ہے وہ پرائم منسٹر کی میٹنگ میں گزرتا ہے, اور جب وہ نہیں گزرتا کیونکہ وہ بیلاروس گئے ہوئے ہیں تو پھر میں ادھر آتا ہوں. So we are used to that, and that's what public service is. Because at some stage in life, a lot of people say that, but really, I mean, I don't know how many of you are have crossed that age bracket, but once you enter that age bracket, آپ کو ایک پرسنل کانٹینٹ نہیں ہوتی, آپ سیٹسفیکشن نہیں ہوتی جب تک آپ پے بیک نہ کریں. اور میرے لیے ایک بہت ضروری چیز تھی کہ میں 1990 میں 15 سال رہنے کے بعد پاکستان آیا, اور all along I always felt that Pakistan could do better, and I always used to compare Pakistan with the West because where I spent a lot of time and still go for business reasons. And یہ جذبہ جو میرے اندر آیا اور میں نے لوگوں میں جو دیکھا, جس طرح ہمارے ہی لوگ باہر کے ملکوں میں جا کے اسکائی اسکریپرز بناتے ہیں, دبئی کی 50 ڈگری سینٹی گریڈ ہیٹ میں جا کے بلڈنگز بناتے ہیں, ایک ایک کمرے میں 10-10 لوگ رہ کے سیکریفائس کرتے ہیں, اور پیسے اور ڈالر پاکستان کو بھیجتے ہیں, اپنی فیملیز کو بھیجتے ہیں. یہ سیکریفائس کا مادہ مجھے دنیا میں کہیں نظر آیا. لک ہاؤ وی ہیو فاٹ دا وار اگینسٹ ٹیررزم. ہمارے نیٹو پارٹنرز نے کتنے پیسے خرچ کیے اور ان کے ریزلٹس دیکھ لیں, اور ہماری فوج نے اس سے 1/1000واں حصہ بھی خرچ نہیں کیا. اور آج تک ہیٹس آف ٹو دوز بریو سولجرز جو آج بھی اپنی چھوٹے چھوٹے بچوں کو چھوڑ کے جاتے ہیں اور ہماری سیکیورٹی کی خاطر اپنی جانیں دیتے ہیں, so that we can have a better environment to do business and we can have a better Pakistan to live in. So we should never forget their sacrifices and what they are doing. And اس کنٹری میں جب میں ان کو دیکھتا ہوں اور اس کنٹری میں جو پوٹینشیل ہے, I tell you, what a resilient country. مجھے یہ بتائیے کہ کتنی کنٹریز اس طرح کی ٹیررزم اور اس کو فیس کر کے اٹھتی ہیں, ذرا سا ماحول ٹھیک ہوتا ہے, we start to take off. So there is no reason that this country cannot become a fully developed country. Now I'll come back because there are a lot of things to answer. میں جلدی جلدی کروں گا, کچھ common points تھے, overlapping تھے, but most of them were separate points by our distinguished speakers. دیکھیے, آپ تو prosperous businessman ہیں, that is why you have a position here in the chamber. A lot of businessmen are not that prosperous, and a lot of businessmen are facing tremendous problems. اگر آپ یہ لوگ problems face کر رہے ہیں, تو imagine what is happening to the other businessmen. I see the factories close. I see steel mills, I see paper and board mills, I see textile mills. They should not close. I mean, they closed because of certain wrong decisions in the past, in some previous eras, جس کی وجہ سے ہماری میکرو اکنامک پکچر بہت خراب ہوئی, اور ہماری انفلیشن آپ دیکھیے کہاں تک پہنچی, اور ہماری بجلی کی قیمتیں کہاں تک پہنچی, and we had to become a part of the IMF program to save ourselves from default. But that is the past, that is over, and we have started on the road to recovery, starting with a decline in the policy rate by 10%, and hopefully the way the inflation is going to go down. We have started the way to recovery on the power rates by the announcement of the Prime Minister of substantial relief to the consumers, ordinary consumers and the industry. And our next aim is our corporate tax rates. With these corporate tax rates, we are not competitive in the region. میں ایک بات بڑا کلیئر آپ کو بتا دوں, میں آپ سب کی بات بالکل اگری کرتا ہوں. پاکستانی انڈسٹریلسٹ اور پاکستانی بزنس مین پاکستان میں رہنا چاہتا ہے, باہر نہیں جانا چاہتا. تو جب وہ باہر جاتا ہے تو اس کا مطلب ہے کہ وہ انتہائی مجبوری میں جا رہا ہے. اور businesses are not charitable organizations. Yes, they have a social responsibility, and most of us do that. But they have to depend on profit, rate of return on equity, on investment, on assets and everything. That's the way a capitalist society works. And if they do not get a proper rate of return, that is when you see a flight of capital. That is when, under extreme conditions, they decide to move out. It is not easy to set up businesses outside Pakistan. ہم لوگ یہاں پلے جمے ہیں, ہمیں یہاں ہمارے کانٹیکٹس ہوتے ہیں. میں دیکھتا ہوں جو باہر جاتے ہیں, اٹس ناٹ ملک اینڈ ہنی. آج کل تو باہر پیسہ رکھوانا بھی بڑا مشکل ہو گیا ہے. So everybody wants to stay here, have the business, make money and reinvest here. The perception that has been created over decades of negative thinking that Amir Admi jo hai chor hai, that has to be gotten rid of. Ye impression ki wealth creation is a sin, it has to be gotten rid of. And Prime Minister Sahab ne bahut dafa bada clearly kaha hai کہ آپ اگر اپنے ٹیکسز دے رہے ہیں اور wealth create کر رہے ہیں, nobody will touch you. That is what we have to lead this whole discussion into. یہ جو سارے ادھر جو 50% مسئلے مسائل ڈسکس کیے گئے ہیں وہ FBR کے کیے گئے ہیں, اور میں اس ادارے میں اس کا ریونیو منسٹر 3 سال رہ چکا ہوں. So I can associate with that. देखिए, मैंने अभी एक जो preliminary हमारी meeting थी, मैंने इसमें कहा था, tax collection is a very important factor in the world. दुनिया में कोई tax deterrence के बगैर नहीं देता, but deterrence should remain a deterrence, और actual penalize और penalty और action मजबूरी में लेना होता है. और ये इकोनॉमी का और जीडीपी का जब तक पहिया घूमता रहेगा तो टैक्स कलेक्शन बढ़ता जाएगा. पहिए को रोक के टैक्स कलेक्ट करना जो होता है दुनिया में कभी कामयाब नहीं हुआ. देयर इज ऑलवेज एन ऑप्टिमम लेवल कि आपने डिटरेंस कितनी करनी है, प्रेशर कितना करना है और टैक्स कितना कलेक्ट करना है. आपने कितने रेट्स रखने हैं. जितना रेट आगे करेंगे और जितनी डिटरेंस करेंगे उतनी चोरी बढ़ेगी और उतनी करप्शन बढ़ेगी. सो यू हैव टू हैव ए बैलेंस ऑन दैट एंड वी आर वर्किंग ऑन दैट. अब मैं आपको एक बात बता दूं कि इतनी आप लोगों ने सही और अच्छी बातें की. ये जो बिलवानी साहब ने बताया कि लोग फॉरेन नेशनैलिटी में कितने पैसे खर्च कर रहे हैं और बाहर जो पैसे लेके जा रहे हैं और फैक्ट्री लगा रहे हैं उसके अंदर कितना इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं. दीज आर ऑल दी रिजल्ट्स ऑफ द लैक ऑफ ट्रस्ट or the lack of confidence of the business community to keep their money here. मैं आपको इन सारी चीज़ों को इनकॉर्पोरेट करके आपका एक एक चीज़ का जवाब दे के जाऊँगा, जल्दी जल्दी से दूँगा. बट मैं एक आप बता दूँ कि इन द फर्स्ट वीक ऑफ स्टार्टिंग माई रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी इन इस्लामाबाद मैंने प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब से 7 कमेटीज़ की इन प्रिंसिपल अप्रूवल ले ली. The way the Prime Minister of Pakistan works, I often say that he doesn't walk, he doesn't jog, he runs and he runs up on his toes. And it's very difficult for the ministers to catch up with him. But we must make use of that. Prime Minister cannot do everything himself. We, his ministers, have to support him and move shoulder to shoulder with him in order to accomplish his mission and in order to make this country prosperous. अच्छा, ये committees क्या है? Now I'm going to go very fast. सबसे पहले इस मुल्क में कोई bankruptcy law नहीं है. Can you imagine that? उसका नतीजा क्या होता है कि 90 दिन में आपका क्रेडिट इंफॉर्मेशन ब्यूरो में अगर नाम आ जाता है तो कोई बैंक आपको, जो पहली बड़ी मुश्किल है एक्सेस टू कैपिटल, कोई बैंक आपको करीब नहीं आता. इसका मतलब है कि आपको ब्रीदिंग स्पेस ही नहीं मिलती. अच्छा, अब जो मसले आ रहे हैं क्रेडिट इंफॉर्मेशन ब्यूरो में नाम आने के, वो 90% उन वजह से आ रहे हैं जो मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक इंडिकेटर्स खराब होने की वजह से हुए थे. क्यों? मार्कअप रेट्स ज़्यादा थे. क्यों? एनर्जी रेट्स ज़्यादा थे. क्यों? कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स रेट्स ज़्यादा थे. तो उसमें अगर हम एक बिजनेसमैन को प्रोटेक्शन क्रेडिटर्स नहीं दे सकते और एक अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं दे सकते कि वो अपने आप को रिस्ट्रक्चर करें, तो दैट्स अ फेलियर ऑफ द सिस्टम. सो दैट कमेटी हैज बीन एक्सेप्टेड एंड इंशाल्लाह वेरी सून वी आर गोइंग टू कम अप विद अ बैंक्रप्सी लॉ टू प्रोटेक्ट दोज पीपल जो विदाउट देयर फॉल्ट एक ऐसी सिचुएशन में आ गए हैं कि उनको अगर सपोर्ट ना की जाए तो फैक्ट्री बंद होगी. पहली बात. दूसरी बात, कमेटी की जो अप्रूवल हुई है, रिवाइवल ऑफ सिक यूनिट्स. यू सी, वी हैव और हैड ए करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट क्राइसिस. क्या होता है कि द मोमेंट आवर जीडीपी ग्रोथ क्रॉसेस 2 or 3%, we have pressure on the reserves. Why? Because our exports do not increase with the same pace of imports. Why? Because we have become an import-dependent economy. Why? Because in certain cases we have had free trade agreements which we were not fully ready for. In all honesty, they were the right things to do, but there is no harm in revisiting them. There is a general perception that the days of import substitution are gone. If that perception is correct, then America, with all that advanced technology, why did America have to impose these super tariffs. They are imposing the super tariffs not just for negotiating purposes, but to revive their dead manufacturing sector. If America could not compete with all their volumes, how can Pakistan compete? So what has happened is that even for domestic consumption, we have not been able to protect those industries which we saw 30 years ago. The proliferation of the industrial sector with small things like lights and bulbs and chandeliers and woodwork and all. It's all now imported, raw material. We never allowed them or protected them enough for them to be competitive. The protection is not given forever. It's given with a sunset clause. Okay? So there has to be a fine line between adequate protection, reasonable protection, and on the other extreme, more than necessary protection. We do not want to spoil or make the industry uncompetitive, but in order for them to start, we have to give them some protection. The whole policy now should be based on export-led industrialization. That is very important. Because what have we done? If today we reach 5% growth, we can, it's not a problem. But it will put pressure on the reserve. What did China do? What did Vietnam do? What did Bangladesh do? What did India do? They built up their reserves first. Because if you do not build up your reserves, you will keep on going back to IMF. So how do you build up your reserves? People say foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment comes in when domestic investment comes in first. Then it follows the domestic investment. Domestic investors will attract the foreign investment. दुनिया में ये हुआ है. And how do you grow your exports exponentially? By doing everything you can, bending backwards to make sure your export industry is competitive. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have high tax rates and high power rates and high markup rates and then expect your exporters to compete in the rest of the world. You can't. You have to make sure, you have to listen to them. I am a firm believer, and so is the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I mean, how many times all you businessmen have been in Islamabad? And he listens to you, and he's a patient listener. Now we have to act on what you guys are saying. There is no policy that we can make without hearing the stakeholders. I am not an expert in all these sectors. I may be an expert in the businesses I run, but this is national policy. I have to see you guys, and I have to make sure that what you are saying, I understand it, and then we bring it in the policy, and we make sure these small irritants and these small things which are impeding our growth, it gets out of the way. I don't believe in too much regulation. Example of Turkey, when Turkey Prime Minister or President Erdogan is still there. Why? Because of the economic revival he brought into Turkey. And why? Because I remember a statement when he came in. He said that I will convert Turkey from a regulatory state to a developmental state. That is what we have to do. We cannot keep on mistrusting our businesses, mistrusting our industrialists. We can't do that. Give them everything they need. Open up the economy. That is the only way we are going to reach new heights. By not believing in your industrialists. They talk of the 50s and the 60s. I opened up my eyes in the 60s. I know that era. It was an era of industrialization. And Pakistan was respected everywhere in the world because of that. We were ahead. I know these charts. We were ahead of everybody. I mean, it's now a cliche that we had a 5-year program and South Korea copied it. That's true. So, and this nation has seen exports doubling in 5 years, revenues doubling in 5 years, everything. We've done it. It's not that we can't do it. We've done it. So, and I tell you, in 4 weeks, what I've seen in Islamabad, a lot of people are doing a lot of hard work. It's just the coordination of different ministries and carrying the vision of the Prime Minister ahead. I think that needs a little bit of improvement. And the Prime Minister, I was talking to a consultant that we have hired, an international consultant, to make the industrial policy, talking of the industrial policy. And I'm going to bring him an industrial policy. Pakistan hasn't had an industrial policy so far in 75, 77 years of its history. I will, inshallah, not leave without giving you people an industrial policy. And that consultant said a lot of other things, a lot of the things that all of you are saying. I mean, there was no rocket science. But 2 things what he said. The condition Pakistan is in, going back a little bit, consultants are only as good as their clients. So if we do not give them information that they require, they're no good. And I like consultants only for the fact because they tell us what other countries have done and how other countries got out of the crisis that we've been facing. That experience they have because they have consulted with a number of countries. So he said 2 things. The way Pakistan is right now and the handicap always that we face on the foreign exchange reserves is you cannot keep on depending on remittances because that is some other nation's productivity, not your productivity. So it's just filling in the gap and there is no permanence in it. The only route to success for Pakistan is export-led industrialization. And he said, these are his words, which resonate with all of what you have said and what I think, is you've got to give everything possible to make your export industry competitive. And that has to be translated into action. There is no reason why you guys cannot increase your export and we talk of these 30 billion, 60 billion and 80 billion. If we make you competitive, we cannot expect miracles from you. A lot of negativity flows in saying that our businessmen are overly protected and our businessmen make a lot of money and they hide it and all that. There may be some. It's in every country. But that's not the general ground reality. It is not. So one is export-led industrialization, and the second thing what he said, and which reinforced my belief that under the administration of Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, we can take a giant leap. And he said there has to be a special high-powered cell in the Prime Minister's Secretariat, which takes care and monitors the implementation of all the decisions taken. And this Prime Minister has it. And you know he's brought in, and I've worked with those people, I don't want to name them. Some of them are really good. Because a lot of things get stuck because of small things. Not big things. The bigger picture is very clear in Islamabad, what we need. All what you've said, everybody is clear. But how to bring together the loose ends and make a strategy and move ahead in a huge government, that is the governance which I think we have the potential to do. So now one by one, the bankruptcy law, the sick units, harassment. Which businessman is sitting here and listening to me who hasn't gone through harassment of investigative agencies, including tax collecting agencies? None. We all have faced it. That doesn't mean that everybody is kosher and an angel. In every economy, even in America, people get caught with cheating and all that. But you cannot generalize that. NAB, FIA, all these things. So NAB has gotten a lot better. I want to make a firewall against the corporate sector, that before an investigative agency attacks, maybe for the right reasons, but before they pick and choose a corporate sector for investigation, they have to go through a check. Maybe SCCP, maybe State Bank of Pakistan, maybe FPCCI, maybe Karachi Chamber, that we will decide. We would like to make that firewall against that. And that doesn't mean that we are going to spare the people who are actually doing the wrong thing, but that means that we are going to not let these agencies affect the people who are not doing the wrong thing. Okay, so that another committee is going to be formed and we're going to change the rules or make some laws. Protection of investment. I was the architect of the first amnesty policy, the 2018, because there was a new regime of exchange of information that was being brought in. And I felt, and a lot of businessmen had spoken to me, that give us one, and I don't call that amnesty. And it was very difficult.